Welcome everybody to the latest start to the FBAN Practitioners Group webinars for this year. Today we've got Paul Fox-Hughes from the Bureau of Meteorology talking about fire weather and the prototype fire danger ratings associated with the Gell River fire in Tasmania. Thanks very much, Paul.
Okay, thanks Mike, and good afternoon everyone. Just by way of background, this work came about. Simon Heemstra, who oversees the new fire danger rating system work in the New South Wales RFS, suggested that it would be a good idea for the Bureau to present something on the fire danger rating system earlier this year. And this was just after the fires had in Tasmania earlier in the year had caused a lot of damage, and I'd been involved in doing some briefings for them, and so I'd been looking at one or two aspects of them reasonably closely. So I thought, oh well, look, this might be a good topic to talk about. So that's the background, if you like. We'll have a look at a few aspects of this incident, but before I do that, I should acknowledge that there's a lot of help that we got from the Tas Fire Service, of course, and that the New South Wales Rural Fire Service is leading the development of the new fire danger rating system with the oversight of AFAC, of course. Any of these things, there are a lot of people involved, and that's certainly no exception here. The fire danger rating team have done a power of work in getting the system established and getting the prototype up and running. So it's important to acknowledge their contribution. We'll have a look at a couple of aspects before we get going into the details of the case itself. We'll have a look at the background to the fire. Have a look at some of the meteorology that happened on the day of the main run of the fire and the lead up to it. And we'll step back a bit and have a look at the fire danger rating system, Australian fire danger rating system, and how we generate the forecasts on a daily basis. And then we'll have a bit of a look at some of the limitations that were highlighted by this particular case, and some of the prospects for improving as time goes by. Because one of the key features of the new system is that it should be open to continual improvement, and certainly we're designing it and expecting it to progress in that fashion. The Gell River fires, Gell River's in this area here, the sort of the middle one of the big complexes of fires that occurred in Tasmania in the early part of this year, 2019. It was a fairly major complex in its own right. It got going a bit before some of the other fires. There were two major lightning outbreaks, I guess, during the summer. One of them occurred in late December, and that was what generated the Gell River fire. There was another band of lightning, active lightning in mid-January that caused much of the or ignited many of the other fires that caused problems later on. The Gell River fire, as I said, was one of 126 fires. A couple of 100,000 odd hectares burnt in total over the course of the fires. Gell River itself was about 35,000 hectares, so a significant proportion of the total. And it was important because it affected natural values. It burnt in the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area and threatened at one stage to overrun at least parts of the Mountfield National Park. It also threatened a number of Upper Derwent Valley communities. Maydena in particular was looking at having to evacuate at one stage. The major electrical transmission infrastructure from the west coast hydro dams through to southeast Tasmania was at a considerable risk too at several points during the course of the fire. And there were also impacts on pine plantations for newsprint, something like 500 out of 5,000 hectares of pine plantation was burnt over by the fire, and it was a matter of luck really that the rest wasn't burnt as well. The fire resources were unable to do anything to contain the fire as it moved into the area and had to pull back. So they were just very lucky that the entire plantation wasn't burnt out. A couple of pictures here showing aspects of the fire. So this left-hand image is a air attack image of the fire, of the Gell River fire on the 4th. You can see it's very active. And on the right-hand side, this was taken from the roof of the Bureau building. This central building here is where the Premier of Tasmania sits, and this cloud here was the smoke cloud that passed over Hobart as a result of the fire activity on the 4th of January. And if we go to the next slide, you can see the Himawari image of that smoke plume moving right over the top of Hobart during the day on the 4th. They can also see the cold front approaching the west coast of Tasmania that we'll talk about in a minute. So looking now at the weather effects on the fire, there's some significant antecedent conditions that are at play here. The most significant, I guess, of these is the changes in rainfall that have occurred over the last couple of decades. So this image here is from the State of Climate report that the CSIRO and Bureau published late last year, in 2018. The focus of the article and the image was the very considerable increase in warm season rainfall to have occurred in the west of the country, and by warm season here we're talking about October through to April. It wasn't really commented on in the article or in the image, but there are some areas where there has been a decrease in warm season rainfall, so southwest WA, eastern Queensland, particularly Victoria, but particularly the western part of Tasmania. So what's happened here is that over the last couple of decades, the westerly wind belt, which even during summer still brought rainfall onto the west coast, has gradually diminished or moved southwards, meaning that the rainfall into the west of Tasmania has declined during the warm season, and notably it's declined. The rainfall's declined more than anywhere else in the country during that period. So that kind of sets the scene for fires early this year and fires that happened in say 2016 and at other periods over the last decade or so as well. The rainfall for the 3 months to the end of the year is entirely consistent with that scenario. So western Tasmania as a whole experienced below average rainfall, and some parts of the a significant proportion of the west coast experienced very much below average rainfall, so the lowest 10 percentile of the record that we have. And the rainfall for the month of December, so leading up to the start of the fires, rainfall was actually average, but largely average, but there was this deficit that was being carried forward as a consequence of the lack of rainfall in earlier months. So on the 27th, as I mentioned, of December, because of the passage of a couple of troughs of low pressure, there was fairly widespread lightning that occurred across Tasmania, but particularly in the area of Gell River here. You can see this cluster of lightning strikes. There were a couple of fires that got going and combined, or ultimately combined, but basically on the 27th and the subsequent days were able to keep keep alight due to the favourable conditions. It's fairly warm, it's fairly dry, and so they were able to keep burning away, such that the next time there were suitable conditions, which was the 4th of January, with a cold front that I mentioned earlier, approaching the state. It had the sort of typical hot, dry and windy conditions that are conducive to fire growth occurring across much of Tasmania, but over the fireside in particular. Stepping back a bit, I'll have a look at how we generate the fire danger rating systems in the new system at the moment. So, taking Western Australia as an example here, we have a map of fuel across the country. This is one of the big achievements of the new system. Belinda Kenny did a power of work to generate a nationally consistent fuel map across Australia. This is something that people have been talking about as a necessity for a long time, but Belinda managed to get it done in a relatively short period of time. So this fuel map is at pretty high spatial resolution, but it's upscaled to 1.5 kilometres. On the other hand, the weather data is taken from the Bureau's Australian Digital Forecast Database, the ADFD grids, out of the grid forecast editor that the forecasters manipulate across the country. That's, as I say, it's 6 kilometres or 3 kilometres, depending where you are. That's downscaled to 1.5 kilometres in the system, and so that you've got two consistent spatial maps, or at consistent spatial resolution. The fuel map and the weather map. You've got 8 different fire behaviour models that are applied depending where in the country the calculations are being carried out at any particular time, and so you end up with a set of fire behaviour indices across the landscape. Again, depending on what type of fuel you've got, those indices are scaled to the rating system that has 6 different levels from, they haven't got names yet, but 1 is the lowest up to 6, which is the highest. Not every fuel type has a category 6. A category 6 is, protection of life and property, retreat from fire, more or less, but not exactly the same as catastrophic. We're trying to avoid comparisons with the current system as much as possible, but essentially that's what that level means, and not all fuel types will support that. So I think from memory, Spinifex doesn't, for example, because you don't get the sort of fire in Spinifex that you can potentially do in a tall forest. So for each of the fuel types, or each grid cell, a category is established every day, and then you end up with the map of fire danger, or maximum daily fire danger, as this one is. I should say too that there are maps available every hour of the fire danger during the day, and from those the daily maximum maps are created rather than them being created sort of as a daily value. So that allows you to, as you can at the moment, look in and see how the fire danger changes over the course of the day. So anyway, we've got the fire danger index, or the fire behaviour indices, pardon me. From those, the fire danger ratings are generated, and then through the same sort of process that happens at the moment with the current system, a district or fire weather area average value is created. And at the moment, again, this is using the 10 percentile rule, so the top 10% of ratings for each fire weather area is used to generate the district-wide or area-wide FDI. So in this particular case, up in the northwest or up in the top of WA, it's Category 4 because at least 10% of the grid cells in that area were Category 4. So this is the map that you presented with as the top level information on a daily basis for the rating system. But also you can look into individual tables, see what those ratings are, and also get an indication of some red flags. So there's a red flag for continuous Haines index, flagged on this particular day for a few districts. There's spotting distance, no red flags in this particular area, and wind change danger index, so the likelihood or the significance of a wind change on the particular day. And again, that's flagged in some areas but not others. So that's the sort of information that we generate on a daily basis, and that was available for the 4th of January this year for the Gell River fire. When we have a look at the actual fire danger on the day and compare the two systems, the McArthur system showed a pretty significant fire risk for much of Tasmania for the 4th of January. There was extreme fire danger in a large part of the southeast, very high fire danger over much of the east of the country, much of the east of the state. But for the Gell River area, it was pretty uniform. There was a general gradation from east to west that followed the rainfall gradient or the general soil moisture gradient, but not a lot of you didn't have a lot of capacity to discern what was going on, because essentially what we're doing in this calculation and what happens around the country is that you have a uniform fuel type, in this case forest, uniform fuel load, 12.5 tonnes per hectare, and essentially what you're varying is the weather and the antecedent rainfall to get the gradation in this map. The new system offers a bit more insight, I guess, because it includes details of the fuel gradation at a much finer granularity than we can do with the current system. Because you've got these 8 fuel types, and you've also got gradations within the fuel types that I haven't gone into, but many of you will be aware of. That means that you can, at a glance, see the potential for much different fire behaviour than you can for the old system. Now, people of course will be aware that different fuels respond differently to the weather, but I think this map offers a compact way of showing that information. So the bit that I've circled here, the red area is pretty much where the fire occurred, and the interesting thing here that struck me was that there's this really sharp gradation between the sort of Category 1, the really low-level fire danger that corresponded to the wet forests on the right-hand side of the ellipse, and Category 5, next to highest level, that corresponded to button grass moorland in the Vale of Rasselas. So there's a pretty distinct gradation there that just simply wasn't really apparent reasonably enough, wasn't apparent when you look at just the forest fire danger index that we routinely publish at the moment. The other thing that's kind of worth noting here is that there is a large gradation in the fire danger rating across pretty much all of the states. So there were some areas, and I'm not sure what fuel type there were, possibly heath, that were Category 6, others that as I said, were Category 1 with pretty much everything in between. And we've seen that a few times, and I think that's pretty useful information to have. You know where the problems are, just essentially from a glance, as I said. We noticed that, again, a few weeks ago in New South Wales, there's essentially every category. I can't remember which fire it was. It might have been the Drake fire, perhaps, that was burning. But it pops up from time to time, and I think that's useful information for focusing where the problems are likely to lie. I mean, again, obviously people will work that out, but this is a useful tool for flagging that at a glance. And this just simply expands on that to show that gradation in a bit more detail. All right, well that's all very nice, but if it doesn't correspond to reality, then that's a bit of a problem. So it's worth checking to see what actually did happen, and these images are courtesy of Warren Frey, who was on the ground pretty early on after the fires, and with whom I had some really useful discussions, got some really good information. What the fire did was to rapidly run through the moorland areas, particularly the blackened bits here, and you can see that much of the moorland was fairly well burnt, as would be expected from the fire danger ratings, that orange bit in the Vale of Rascalis. The areas of forest, which you can sort of see up here, and there are other areas down in this second image here, there's a bit of a mixed story there. You can see that obviously some bits of the forest were burnt, but other bits remain pretty green, and particularly the core areas. It's especially the areas around the periphery that seem to have been burnt most, but acknowledging that there are other areas where the fire ran through the forested regions, but there were kind of mixed reports that in some areas the forest held as the forecast suggested that it would. In other areas the forest didn't act as a barrier to the progress of the fire. So the forecasts did reasonably, but weren't entirely accurate. But again, provide a useful, in this particular case, provide a useful guide to, a first cut at what you might expect. So, it's a reasonable thing to ask, well, why didn't the forecast perform as well as you might hope? Why did the fire get into the forest in some areas? And I think the answer lies in the soil moisture information that was available at the time, and this is this obviously affects both the current and the new fire danger rating systems. You can see that this is sort of Gell River area again. You've got this when you look at the average rainfall over Tasmania, there's gradation from west to east, of course. East tends to be drier, west tends to be wetter because you've got generally westerly winds most of the year, tending to ease off more now, as we noted early on in the webinar. And the interesting / difficult thing is that the highest rainfall gradient occurs pretty much in this area. A key input, of course, to the fire danger rating is having soil and ergo fuel moisture, and it's quite difficult to come by in exactly this area where the gradient is tightest, as I mentioned somewhere earlier on. It's a pretty remote area. It's topographically diverse, which will affect the rainfall into any particular area as well. So it's a difficult place to characterise the soil moisture. And again, this just highlights that, through this area, there's much less in the way of rainfall information and so soil moisture information than there is over much of the state. Western Tasmania's not highly populated, and the infrastructure is pretty widely distributed. So that I think is a key reason for the cases where the fires overran the forest edges. Another side of it is that the organic fuels that exist in parts of Western Tasmania aren't really well represented either. There is some work that people are trying to do to better characterise those, but that would have been a contributing factor as well. So in summary then, the fire danger rating system integrates a lot of the fire behaviour from different models in a I think a useful way. It improves the forecast in general terms compared to, say, a simply forest fire danger rating system, and it's also easier to assimilate in the maps as we saw. There is a lot of scope for improvement, we just discussed that, but again, as I said earlier on, the modular framework that the new system involves allows for the possibility of continual improvement as the science progresses, and that's certainly the way that we're focusing on building the system, and that it will be implemented as it goes into operations. So that's it. Hope you found that useful.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay,
Paul?
Wait, I'll just have to unmute everyone.
Sure.
Oh.
The conference is now in conversation mode. All participants are now unmuted.
Over to you, Mike.
Okay, does anyone have any questions of Paul? And thank you, Paul, for that. That was really good.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Deathly silence?
All gone to sleep.
Obviously there aren't any questions, Paul, so they're stunned by what you've done, or they thoroughly understand and accept.
Yeah, oh, look, let's hope for the latter.
Someone looks to be typing a message in at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's Clinton. Clinton, if you're online, you can speak if you're near a phone.
Hello.
Yep, hi.
Yeah, great. Clint Hayward here from Tas Fire Service. Just interested, you were mentioning about the soil moisture is a large part of the, well not large, but it's a component of the limiting factors. So is there any further research, or is there any further assessments or reviews into getting better data along the west coast of Tas?
Yeah, look, there is. There's a soil moisture sensor that CSIRO have very generously relocated from a project that they're no longer using it for. From, I think that was up at Ringarooma. I believe a few weeks ago it was put down near Scott's Peak. So that's actually in the where it's been located is in the organic soil in that area. So we're hoping that that'll help better characterise the behaviour of the soil moisture in that type of environment, because and I'm not a soil scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm told that organic soils have been a problem in trying to deal with in land surface models and in soil moisture models, not just in Australia but globally. So hopefully if we can get some useful information out of that sensor, we're hoping to be able to use it in the new Bureau's land surface model, the Jasmine system, which characterises soil moisture again in a more comprehensive fashion than the current, the SDI as it's used in Tassie. The Jasmine basically sits on the back of the Bureau's numerical weather prediction system, so there are, the weather models have to account better for moisture and heat and what have you going in and out of the soils because they affect the atmosphere. So Jasmine we know is better than the SDI, and yes, particularly as we start hopefully get a better handle on the organic soils, that'll help improve Jasmine.
Awesome. Okay, can't watch this space, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Anyone else with a question?
Yeah, so Tony Shell here from ACT Parks Conservation. I think you answered that question about Jasmine and the relationship to it. I mean, that's for fire danger, but we'd be looking pretty keenly at using it for prescribed burning. Is there any sort of views on how that's developing at the moment?
Yeah, look, it is still developing, Tony. There's data that's, you probably know there's data that is available on the AFMS website, Marty Ebra's live fuel moisture content website. She's very generously hosting some of the Jasmine data. It's updated about once a week at this stage. It's still a research project, of course, but there's been a lot of work done to establish that it is actually a good or a better indicator of soil moisture than either KBDI or SDI, and we're looking at how to bring it into operations. You probably know there are a couple of different soil moisture systems running in the Bureau that have developed from different backgrounds. So there's Aura, which has a flood modelling background, and Jasmine, which has come up from the fire direction. We're looking at, do we combine these two systems and use the best of both, or do we tack bits of Jasmine information onto the really nice Aura site that has been developed? So we're kind of working through those things at the moment, and hope to have an approach to operationalising the useful bits of Jasmine, if not the whole system, sometime soon.
Thanks for that.
No worries.
Anyone else? Sounds like you've done quite well. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, Mike.